Thank you for the opportunity to tell you about patient innovation. And before I actually tell you about our project, let me tell you a little bit about our research. Because what I used to do is research about the role of users in developing new products and services. And before actually entering the healthcare arena, what we did was studies about other industries. For instance, we all know about Mr. Ford. Mr. Ford was really important for the auto industry because he created Ford Motor Company. He was able to do mass production of cars in a way that everyone could actually get one, or lots of people at least could get one. At the same time, it was good news for everybody that some people were not really happy with the car that they were getting. And as soon as they got it, they actually start doing some modifications. And you see that, a farmer in the northern part of Michigan, when he realizes that it snows a lot during the winter, he starts doing some modifications to come up with the first snowmobile, or the first tractor, or the first truck. Some of these things actually made it to the market, are commercial products now. Others were not so successful. I come from the Catholic University of Portugal, but, this moving chapel actually didn't make it as a commercial product. So we see that over and over again in different industries, right? For instance, to give you an example, in Portugal, this is a farmer in the southern part of the country where, among other problems, he has this problem of weeding. This guy actually produces a lot. He has 20 hectares of this. And the weeding is a lot of manual work. So instead of doing this by hand, he came up with a machine, the one that you see here. I actually have an hard time calling this a machine because it involves so many people, right? So what we are talking about are users, what we call user innovators, because these people innovate with the objective of using. And like companies, when they produce something, they do that with a commercial objective in mind. Users are different, right? They sometimes come up with things that sound sort of stupid. I don't know if you could guess what this is. This is a laptop privacy protector. I mean, for people that want to use the laptop in public places and don't want to be disturbed. You see, but we were doing studies in different industries, and then we were always avoiding to go to healthcare because it would be really hard to find patients that could actually develop new solutions to help them cope with their disease. We were wrong. And that's when we met Mr. Tail Goldsworthy. And Tail is now a very good friend of mine. In 2002, Tail went to see his doctor, and his doctor told him, "I'm sorry, but you are going to die." Well, it wasn't that dramatic. He told him, because of your aorta condition, because Tail is a very big man, is a Marfan syndrome patient, because of your condition, because of your aorta being so fragile that probably is not going to be strong enough for all the flow of blood that goes through it, it's likely that you will have a rupture that we cannot prevent. So I anticipate that you are at risk of dying maybe in 2 years. This was in 2002. And Tail went home thinking about this, right? Because if you think about this, if the need is the mother of so many inventions, one knowing that he's going to die is probably a strong incentive to do something about it. At the time he realized that what he had was, from an engineering point of view, a very basic problem, which he was able to fix. At Tom, what he did was to develop the aortic support that you see over there. And a couple months later, he walked in the doctor's door in England. He did that in England, and asked the doctor, "Would you mind putting this thing in? Because it's something I cannot do at home, right? Putting an aortic support is something that you cannot do at home. But if you help me, maybe I can survive. And, if it doesn't work, it looks like I may die, which is something that you are telling me that is going to happen anyway." So, here we are, 11 years later. Tal is alive, he's full of energy, he saved his own life, and he saved the life of 56 other patients that actually received the same aortic support. So in our research, we start bumping into people like Tail or Louis Plant. Louis Plant suffers from a fatal disease, cystic fibrosis. One of the things about this disease is that life expectancy used to be 5 years, and is now about 40 years. When we look at the solutions that work for cystic fibrosis, most of them were developed by patients. This is one of them. Louis is a patient. He was suffering dramatically. He says, you can't even imagine how I was suffering after a lung transplant. All my body was hurting. And the solution out there is what they call chest clapping, chest clinging. You beat your chest for 4 hours per day in the hope that this will remove the mucus from the lungs. And then, through spectoration, you can actually clean the lungs. So that's what people were doing to kids, to adults, using the so-called ketchup bottle principle. And the ketchup bottle principle illustrates what they do to people, right? How do you remove the ketchup from the bottle? You do this, right? That's what basically we do to people. Well, we knew this story very well. So one day, he was really intrigued because he went to a concert. And he realized that when the musicians were playing in this concert, he would start coughing. And then the musicians stopped playing, and he would stop coughing. And it was actually embarrassing because you are supposed to be silent in a concert. He says, during break in particular, people start looking at me, right? Because it's your chance to do all the coughing, and you are not doing anything now. And after the break, actually the endament of the music increased, and he went crazy. He couldn't stand it. He actually had to leave the concert, had this huge crisis of spectoration. He went home and realized that this was happening because he was getting all the vibrations from the music. Wow, this was bad news if he was in a concert, but if he was at home, this could actually be very good news. So what he did at home was to try to experiment with a speaker. He put a speaker in front of his lungs, and now he was controlling for the music. And this was working very well. So well that he actually developed the machine that you see over there, the frequencer, which is now a commercial product, that basically brings the music vibrations, now without sound, and helps patients to clean their lungs. So, in our research, we were finding all sorts of solutions, like Atmik Gopher from Israel, who after getting paralyzed in a car accident is actually tetraplegic. He doesn't move anything below the neck. He had the time and for sure the incentive to develop the most sophisticated exoskeleton that you see out there in the market now. This was developed by a patient. And this is typically not the story that you see in healthcare, right? Patients are not supposed to develop new solutions and bring them to the doctor's office and ask, could you put this thing around my aorta? But we were finding these over and over again, and I could actually tell you at least 400 stories like this. Like Joaquina, and Joaquina was very important for our project because she's from Portugal, so I found her in the process of our research, and Joaquina had a very different story. I mean, she's not a patient, she's a caregiver. She takes care of her son. Her son is an Angelman syndrome patient, which means that, among other problems, when these kids are supposed to stand up and walk, they don't do it. They don't have the energy, the muscles to do that. This mother tried everything to actually convince her son to stand up and walk. Nothing was working. And one day she was really intrigued because she went to a party. She took the kid, and to her surprise, her kid was all excited when he saw some helium balloons floating around. She thought, look, if you get excited with some helium balloons that cost nothing, I know what to do. And what she did was to buy 100 balloons. She spread the balloons around the house, and shortly after, the kid was walking. And to my surprise, this is a very simple story. I wasn't even convinced if this was an innovation. But as I was talking about this, people in the audience would write me back and say, thanks for sharing. My son has a different disease, and it works. Sometimes some mother told me that, in fact, I think my son is just very lazy, but it works too. So people were actually giving us good feedback. And this was happening in the context of our research, because as I told you, we were researchers, right? We are researchers. And what we did was a study of 500 patients in which we found out that 8% of these patients, 40 patients, had developed solutions that were new to the world. This is after a medical team looks at the solutions that they did and actually confirms, look, as far as we know, this is new. In fact, another 28% did things that at least were new to them. If you think about this, if 8% of the patients out there develop solutions for themselves, this is amazing because nobody's looking at this. At the same time, these patients were telling us that what they did for themselves really matters. This has a positive impact in their quality of life. In fact, the quality of life improves in a 5-point Likert scale, 2 points. This is significant. So this matters a lot. What's the bad news? The bad news is that people are not sharing these solutions. Only 5% of the people that, in fact, develop things that work for them share the solutions with their doctors. There's very little diffusion. So, with this in mind, what we thought was, look, If we put together a platform for patients, caregivers, other sorts of collaborators to search solutions that they did for themselves, if we do this platform open to any language, to any geography, maybe people will jump in and do things that are interesting. And by sharing, this could be really important for many patients. So we did that. We did that about 18 months ago. And what happened in about 18 months is that we collected over 350 solutions, just counting here the ones that were medically validated, or to be more precise, that went through medical screening. These 350 solutions come from over 30 countries now, being the US, Portugal, England, Australia, and Brazil, the leading providers of solutions for our platform. And other exciting things happen. I mean, not just we start getting unexpected supports, such as several Nobel laureates in our advisory board, but also, supports from lots of patient associations from all over the world that contact us and said, look, it would be really cool if we could actually spread the news about your platform. And of course, it's good news for us as well, because we need to reach patients. The other thing that happened was very intriguing. At some point, the United Nations Development Programme called us and said that we are very excited about this project. They actually put this in their website. At some point, we participated in a competition at Harvard, organized by Harvard Medical School and Harvard Business School. And we were, out of 475 projects from all over the world, the only semi-finalist that was not US. But more than that, we got more votes than any other project. And if you allow me to brag, we got 5 times more votes than the second project that got more votes, which was very good. Later on, the Digital Initiative of the European Commission called us a startup to follow. And this was very cool, because we aren't even a startup, but you should follow us. And then EPI was also very nice when he wrote an article talking about many things, including us, saying that patient innovation is an impressive platform, and we think he's right. So, let me give you a little bit of background, because what we are looking at here is what we call the user innovation paradigm, the idea that often users develop solutions for themselves, and this is very important in terms of sources of innovation. Our platform can actually help here, because there are some problems that these users have. For instance, it's very important for them to innovate in the very first place. It's very important for them to share. They don't even understand the notion of innovation, of diffusing innovation. Our platform is allowing all this. And by bringing together to the same place other sorts of collaborators that I will mention soon, this actually increases impressively the amount of innovation that is going on. On one side, we see the user innovation paradigm. On the other side, we see the so-called producer innovation paradigm, and I'll talk about that. That's when companies jump in. So, on one side, we were attracting patients. We knew that. Patients innovate, to an extent that was really surprising. And I mentioned examples from cystic fibrosis, and I told you how the vast majority of solutions out there for this disease that is still fatal, but in terms of life expectancy, it's now much better than it used to be. All these solutions were developed by patients or caregivers. Sometimes it's not really the patient. It's the mother or the father of a kid with cystic fibrosis that realized that while the kid was jumping in a trampoline, he was having a lot of fun, and at some time he was shaking the entire body, including the lungs, therefore loosening the mucus from the lungs. This was very cool. And at some point, their doctor, wrote a scientific article about this, suggesting the use of trampolines in kids. Of course, instead of doing a treatment to your kid, you'd rather send him to a trampoline, right? It's a lot of fun. So we were finding all these examples, sometimes from caregivers like Debbie Hamilton, again, a woman from Israel that has a son with cerebral palsy, and again, these kids don't walk. So she developed the so-called EPSI that you see there on the right, a solution for these kids to walk. Or, the father of Keely. Keely was stuck to a bed when she wanted to do she didn't want to do it, her chemotherapy, right? Now she can actually walk around because her father developed the so-called intravenous backpack. So, these solutions often don't show up in the market side. And actually, often the patients don't have incentives and resources to innovate. Let me tell you what happened in terms of collaborations as well with our platform. Let me tell you about Ivan Owen. Ivan Owen is a puppeteer. I mean, he does puppets for theater. He's from Seattle, and at some point what he did that was really intriguing was to develop an end, the one that you see on the corner there, for theater, and he put that on YouTube. And you know, it's an ugly end that nobody would like to use. Well, except that he got an email from a guy in South Africa saying, look, my name is Richard Van As, I am a carpenter, and the machine just chopped 3 of my fingers. So now I don't have fingers, right? I saw your end, and guess what? It would be really helpful if I could get one of those. So they got in touch, and Ivan helped Richard Van As to get one end. And it was very cool because, you know, BBC picked on this story, and Ivan started getting all sorts of orders for ends, right? Which is something that it doesn't do typically. At some point, what he did was to actually develop the code for people to produce ends. And here you have an end that we recently produced in Lisbon for Nuno. It's actually more than an end. It's an end and an arm for Nuno, a 7-year-old kid that was born without arm and end. And, you know, I'm telling you this story because an end like this, that actually is slightly more complicated than this one, can cost in materials about 18 euros. If you think about it, it costs 18 euros for me in my office to produce an end and an arm, in that case, while, you know, an alternative prosthetic out there probably costs 10,000, right? We have been producing a few. This was actually finished yesterday. It's a different model. Think about it. Over the weekend, we actually printed an end for Nuno. Nobody could anticipate that suddenly people would start calling me in and say, would you mind producing an end for me and an arm, something like that? You know, this is happening now in our project. So on one side, what we are realizing is that we are fixing a very important problem in user innovation, which is, you know, users don't have the incentive to diffuse. Often they don't even know exactly how to innovate. Sometimes these innovations are very basic. They require more development. Now, with our platform, we can actually call other sorts of people, like Ivan Owen, that we call collaborators, to jump in and give an end, literally, right? But sort of help others getting what they need. On the other side, what was intriguing as well is that some patients, some caregivers, came to us and said, look, we need your help. We want to commercialize the solution. I already showed you some solutions that were developed by patients and caregivers, and even commercialized by patients and caregivers. So what we are doing now is to try to create an ecosystem of companies that actually is created or co-created by, on one side, patients, caregivers, sometimes other sorts of collaborators, because these people often don't care, right? I just want to give it to someone else. So that's the big plan right now, to create this ecosystem of companies that have this special characteristic, which is they are by patients and caregivers. And let me tell you about our team. Apart from our local team in Lisbon, Portugal, on the left, we were fascinated by the fact that we could attract very notable, reputable people to our advisory board, including, for instance, Richard Roberts, a Nobel laureate in medicine, or Aaron Shishanova, another Nobel laureate, or Eric Van Ippel from MIT, the father of user innovation, or Bob Langer. Bob Langer is not yet a Nobel laureate, but to give you an idea, Bob Langer is the person on Earth with more patents. He has submitted over 2,000 patents. He has approved over 1,200 patents. Actually, his vita is so impressive that he has several lines that end in history. For instance, he is the most cited engineer in history. He is the person with more patents in history. It's a quite impressive resume. Again, none of this could really be expected. These are not my friends. I would not dare inviting them for my project, but they approached us and offered to help. And, you know, to conclude, let me tell you that Sir Richard Roberts, this Nobel laureate in medicine, thinks that this is an outstanding use of social media that should help many disadvantaged people. And I will just conclude by saying that I agree. Thank you.